really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those...
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Country Roads Webcast, brought to you by Trio 4 Productions. And we are also proud to announce now that we are the official podcast of Almost Heaven Athletics and the newly unveiled almostheavenathletics.com. So they got a lot of great WVU content coming out there at almostheavenathletics.com. I myself am a content contributor there, trying to write some articles for them as well. So give that a check out if you haven't already, almostheavenathletics.com. You can now find our podcast there on almostheavenathletics.com under the podcast section of the menu, and then you can still find us on SoundCloud and of course the video side on YouTube. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in here today on this edition to preview the West Virginia Mountaineers' 7th game of the 2018 WVU football season as they get set to take on the Baylor Bears in Morgantown on Thursday night. That game will kick off at 7 p.m. and it'll be televised on Fox Sports 1. Mountaineers coming off a bye week. We all know what happened in their last game. Talked about that on the recap show. If you haven't checked that out, give that a check out as well. We're going to get into Baylor here on this edition. Got a really great show coming up. Going to be joined by Scotty Swingler, who covers Baylor for the Baylor 247 site, as well as host of the Please Bear With Me podcast covering Baylor Bears football. So going to be joined by him here in a few and get a little bit more in depth in our preview of this game. And let's just get a little summary of these two teams going in before we get into our interview with Scotty there. West Virginia comes in at 5-1 overall, 3-1 in Big 12 play, and Baylor comes in at 4-3 overall and 2-2 in Big 12 play. As I mentioned, WVU, of course, is coming off a bye week, and Baylor is as well. So you got two teams coming off of bye weeks coming into this game, so both teams should be well rested and well prepared, and see who comes out on top in this one. As far as Baylor, their head coach is Matt Rule. He's now in his second season, and he's done a really good job there at the Baylor program. They went 1-11 in his first season. He had not a lot to work with there, but you can see that they're steadily improving, especially going into this year. They already have 4 wins, as I mentioned, and they're just becoming a more tougher team, a lot more hard-nosed than the ones that Art Briles employed. The very successful teams Art Briles had there at Baylor were a bit more finesse. Matt Rule does a little bit more physical approach, and he's a good coach. You've seen what he did at Temple there, leading them to 10-win seasons before he left, and that program was one of the worst before he got there, and then he started leading them to 10-win seasons and got this Baylor job. So Matt Rule's a good head coach, and he's going to do a good job there at Baylor and has already, and is going to continue to have them on the right path, I feel like. Baylor is coming off an impressive performance, probably their most impressive of the season, albeit it wasn't a loss, but that loss was to that top 10 Texas Longhorn team, and they only lost that game by 6 points. So they're steadily improving. That was the best defensive performance they've had so far this season as well. And this Baylor team, defense has been their struggle so far this season, but they still employ an explosive offense, albeit a lot different than the one they had in the Art Briles years. This one is more multiple in what they do instead of using those spread/air raid concepts that Art Briles like to use. But this offense is very multiple, and they're led by the quarterback, sophomore in Charlie Brewer. Mountaineer fans may remember him last year in the game against Baylor. West Virginia got off to a big lead. Then they brought in Charlie Brewer as a freshman, and he led a comeback for Baylor. And that was a game that they only ended up losing by 2 points, despite West Virginia being up 35-10 at halftime. So Brewer led a really impressive comeback in that game, and he's having a strong season. He is a dual threat type of quarterback, can hurt you with his arms as well as with his legs. So West Virginia will have to watch out for that. Kind of similar to Brock Purdy from Iowa State in some ways. They can both accurate with the football and both can make plays with their legs. Brock Purdy's probably a little bit better of a runner, but Charlie Brewer can extend the plays and make plays downfield with his arm as well. So West Virginia have to try and keep him in check and corral him. And he's been a big part of their run game because their run game has struggled somewhat this season, but as I mentioned, their offense is explosive, and that is because of their passing offense, which is, of course, their strength. And Brewer has a couple of explosive receivers to throw to in that passing offense, in Denzel Mims and then the other being a transfer in former Tennessee running back Jalen Hurd, whose position change over to wide receiver has actually been a great success thus far, and he's done a really good job, and they still will use him in the backfield at times as well as a running back, especially in short yardage situations, and he actually shows 3 rushing touchdowns on the season to go along with his 3 receiving TDs on the season. So he's a dangerous player, whether he's in the backfield or split out. He's going to make plays, and he's done a good job of changing over to receiver there. I mentioned defense has kind of been Baylor's Achilles heel so far this season, but the pass defense has actually been their strongest point. They're ranked at the bottom in the Big 12 in rush defense and in scoring defense, but their pass defense is actually in the top half of the Big 12, so that may bode well for them in this game, facing off against the Mountaineers, who have a strong passing attack, and so a little bit of a good matchup for them in that aspect anyway, but their defense has struggled this season, being near the bottom of the Big 12 in a lot of categories. But their defense has also been steadily improving as the season goes along, I do believe, as evidenced by their previous game. As I mentioned, they were close to Texas in that game, and actually in that game they shut Texas out in the second half. Texas offense didn't score any points. Baylor's defense really buckled down, and Texas said, in the post-game comments and stuff, that Baylor was very physical. So Baylor's very physical and very sound, and they're going to bring a physical defense here into Morgantown on Thursday night and try and stop this West Virginia offense and lock them down, as they did Texas in that second half. So West Virginia have to find a way to manufacture some yards and score some points against a Baylor defense that had been struggling, but is maybe a little bit more confident now following that Texas game. But as I mentioned, they are one of the bottom defenses in the Big 12 overall, so West Virginia hopefully can find a way to do some things there. Let's talk about how these teams plan to attack each other. As far as Baylor, their plan of attack will be mainly through the air, as I mentioned, and they got the Denzel Mims kid, who's very good, quick guy out there on the outside. Then Jalen Hurd, who's very big, very physical, can line up out wide, line up in the backfield. And so, their offense is kind of similar to what Iowa State did, but they don't have that running aspect that Iowa State did that you gotta worry about. Of course, you always got to stop the run first, but they don't really have that dangerous threat in the backfield like Iowa State did with David Montgomery, who's really great and going to make a lot of plays. So the passing offense will be the main thing West Virginia needs to stop in this one, but the West Virginia defense will also have to attack Charlie Brewer and not let him make any plays on the ground with his legs and in the run game, and then also try and corral him and not let him extend plays and find someone open downfield and make a play. Defensively, Baylor, they'll be physical, and despite being the worst defense, as I mentioned, in the Big 12 against the run, they're primarily still going to try and stop the run. They're going to load the box and try and stop the run. So this is a game where I think you'll see West Virginia probably have to attack through the air a lot, and they may be able to make some plays downfield in this one. And I think instead of some previous games where West Virginia needed to lean on the run to open up the pass, I think in this one West Virginia may make some pass plays that will open up the run game and cause Baylor not to play with such a loaded box that I feel like they're going to do early on, and West Virginia make some plays in the pass game and show Baylor that they can do that, especially coming off their last game against Iowa State where they couldn't get anything going in the pass game. If they can show Baylor, especially early on, that they can get some things going in the pass game, it should probably open up the run later on in the game. So West Virginia, we're going to have to attack with the pass early on, I feel like, and defensively watch for the pass and try and corral Charlie Brewer and don't let him get out and make plays on you, and really key on Denzel Mims and Jalen Hurd. And that's kind of the plan of attack for both teams there. So that's just a brief summary of the personnel of these two teams and of this Baylor team and how I kind of expect these two teams to try and attempt to attack each other. That being said, we're going to get a little bit more in depth into this preview and learn a little bit more about this Baylor football team. We're getting set to be joined by Scotty Swingler of the Please Bear With Me podcast covering Baylor Bears football. So, good segment coming up and a great interview with Scotty. Stay tuned to the Country Roads Webcast. Alright, as promised, we are joined here on the Country Roads Webcast by the host and producer of the Please Bear With Me podcast, as well as a staff writer for Bears Illustrated, Scotty Swingler. Here to help us preview this upcoming West Virginia against Baylor game. Appreciate you coming on, Scotty. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Always happy to talk Baylor football, man.
Yeah, of course. So, no further ado, let's get right into talking it then. Let's start off by talking about head coach Matt Rule. He's now in his second season there at Baylor, and the team's been much improved this season as they currently sit in the top half of the Big 12 conference standings, and they were also only 17 yards away from beating a top 10 Texas team in their most recent game as well. So not only have they drastically improved from last season to this one, I also feel like they've been steadily improving game by game as this season goes on, it seems like. Do you think that this improvement can be attributed to Matt Rule himself and the culture that he's installing there at Baylor? And do you see that improvement continuing and leading to sustained success as long as Matt Rule is the head coach there?
You know, it's really funny that you open by asking me that, because just a week ago, or about a week and a half ago after the Texas game, I wrote an article for Bears Illustrated titled "I Was Wrong." And it was about Matt Rule, because I had kind of given up on Matt Rule just a little bit as a fan. You know, after winning only one game last season, I was ready to be patient. I know coaching regimes take time. But then there were the off-season rumors that he was interviewing for the open head coaching position with the Indianapolis Colts.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 3 games of this season were really rough, man. We beat ACU and UTSA in games that were way closer than they should have been, frankly. And then first half against Duke, the first Power 5 team we played, we looked atrociously bad. And I think at that point I had said, you know what? I don't know if Matt Rule's the guy. But after watching the way the Bears played against Texas, I find myself with great conviction in the front seat of the Matt Rule train. Because speaking strictly in terms of coaching philosophy and style, Matt Rule is a radical change of pace from Art Briles.
Oh, absolutely.
Rule prefers this run-first NFL-style scheme as opposed to spread him out, throw the deep ball a lot, which was the offense Baylor had kind of become known for. And as for culture, his trademark phrase is toughness. He wants to build a team that is physical, that plays hard on every snap, and that can outwill opponents with strength and effort. And what we've seen around here in Waco is that it's taken a lot of time to get some of those players to buy in and sell out for that type of mindset. A lot of weeds have had to be pulled from the garden, if you will, and some of the leftover players from the previous regime have really had to change their mindset and their playing style. But you're right. The results have been evident this season, and especially in the last 2 games Baylor's had at Kansas State, Texas, they've looked much better and really like a good football team. And so I believe in Matt Rule and what he's doing here at Baylor. He already put together the best recruiting class Baylor has ever had this past season, ranked number 22 in the nation.
Wow.
The players love him. Coaches like Tom Herman and David Cutcliffe speak highly of him. So, man, this might sound crazy, Jordan, but I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor is competing for Big 12 titles in the next 4 or 5 years if things keep going the way they're going. And I'm biased, obviously, but Rule is the real deal. And, I think it's going to be fun to see how dangerous the team can get.
No, I agree with you. I do. I think that, evidenced by, what he did there at Temple, that program was really down, and then he came in there and led to 10-win seasons before coming to Baylor.
Yep.
And I figured it may take a while for him to get Baylor turned around, but he's really done it even quicker than I expected this season. Already with the 4 wins, and I'd say definitely probably going to a bowl game, I think. And then, like you said, the physicality is a big part of it, and that's what you heard from a lot of the people from the Texas side of things after that Texas game, was that just Baylor was very physical in that game. And I think that's a good approach. It's like you said, it's a change of pace for sure, but I think he's got him going in the right direction. I tend to think that he's definitely a great coach, and he'll remain successful and keep improving going forward. And I think that one of the things that shows that Baylor's steadily improving is the younger players that they've been playing over the past 2 seasons, and still having success with those younger players. Last year, Baylor was among the top teams in the country as far as featuring freshman players, and that's continued into this year as well, as they have had 28 players make their first appearances in Baylor uniform. So with so many young players, both freshmen and sophomores alike, making plays and finding success already, do you think it shows great potential for this Baylor program moving forward?
Well, here's what's really exciting this season is that the young guys who are getting on the field have earned it with their talent and their hard work. Because what you saw in 2017 was a lot of experienced guys and freshmen playing out of necessity.
Right.
Baylor lost several scholarship players to transfer before Rule even arrived, and then had an awfully injury-riddled season last year. So, for example, I think last season we went into most games with 9 dressed offensive linemen to cover the 5 offensive line spots. And most of those were freshmen or inexperienced guys. I mean, we had a starting center who was a tight end the year before. So you can't win with that kind of depth.
Right.
But this season, Baylor has stayed far more healthy, and the freshmen and sophomores keep seeing the field. That's because they're great players. True freshman Tyquan Thornton has been one of Baylor's most reliable receivers this year. You have a true freshman defensive back, Christian Morgan, with a huge fourth-quarter interception to seal the win against Kansas State. And true sophomore defensive lineman James Lynch, who played every game last season as a true freshman, is already Baylor's best player on defense, and he'll be all Big 12 this season. And so you're absolutely right, man. It bodes really well, and I think that's a huge credit to Coach Rule for finding and developing the guys. And again, I think that talent is why Baylor could be competing for Big 12 championships again in the next 4 to 5 years.
I agree with you. It goes back to what you said about his recruiting success, getting some really talented younger players in there.
Absolutely.
And, one of those younger players that's made an impact is the sophomore in quarterback Charlie Brewer. And Brewer was actually in a bit of a quarterback competition with Jalen McClendon, the transfer, early on in the season. But since winning that job full-time, Brewer's played well. He's averaging 257 yards passing a game, and completing over 62% of his passes as well. So he's also a guy that can hurt you and make plays with his legs. So you got to think the right guy came away with the job there at quarterback. And has his performance impressed you, and do you see him entrenched as the starter there, not only for the rest of this season, but being only a sophomore, probably going forward for this Baylor program in the coming years as well?
Jordan, I've actually been a Charlie Brewer fan since he committed to Baylor out of Lake Travis, which is the high school that has produced a lot of good college quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield, Todd Reesing, Garrett Gilbert. And so I actually said before he even played a snap with Baylor that he'd be a star. And he's proven to be exactly that. As for the quarterback competition, I wouldn't overthink it, because one thing about Coach Rule that makes him unique is he never declares permanent starters. He hates depth charts. His philosophy is whoever looks best at practice this week will start.
Okay.
And so Baylor's already seen, for example, 5 or 6 guys start at cornerback this season because Rule wants every position to be a competition every single week. So that being said, I think Charlie Brewer is as entrenched as anyone can be under Coach Rule. He's the guy. You might remember his first major appearance last season was against West Virginia, and he was a 2-point conversion away from taking West Virginia to overtime after a crazy comeback.
Yeah, I was actually mentioned that a little bit earlier, that we Mountaineer fans should definitely remember Charlie Brewer well, because he came in that game. I think the score was like 35-10 at halftime or something like that.
Yeah.
And then West Virginia only managed a field goal in that second half, and Charlie Brewer had the offense really working better than it had all game by far, and he was really impressive in that game.
Well, and since that game, he's been clearly Baylor's best signal caller. He'll be the starting quarterback at Baylor until he chooses to leave. And I think due to his size, he's going to stay for all 4 years. But he's special, man. He's got everything you want in a college quarterback. He's smart with the football. He's deadly accurate. He's the most accurate quarterback in Texas high school history. You're talking about the state that produces guys like Drew Brees and Matt Stafford. He's deceptively fast, and he's a winner, man. He's a competitor. He puts his body on the line and takes big risk. I think he really just wants to do whatever it takes to win a football game. And so there isn't a quarterback in the country I would rather have leading my team than Charlie Brewer. I mean that.
I can agree with that. I mentioned going into the season that I thought that he was the second best returning quarterback in the Big 12, and he definitely seems to have that it factor, and he's been solid, and he's helped this Baylor offense improve in a big way, really, as they've shown a high-powered attack. And, another big factor in creating that has been the explosive receivers, and Baylor certainly possesses a couple of explosive ones at that position in Denzel Mims and Jalen Hurd, as they both currently rank top 5 in the conference in both receptions per game and in receiving yards per game. Respectively, what do each of those guys bring to the offense, and how much of an impact has the addition of Jalen Hurd made for this offense in general, given his versatility and the fact that he can line up in the backfield as well at times?
Well, Coach Rule set the bar super high in the spring when he told the media that former Tennessee running back Jalen Hurd is already an NFL caliber receiver, and he wasn't lying. But let me talk about Denzel Mims first. Jalen Hurd comes in from the SEC, and he gets all the hype, but Mims might be the most talented receiver in the Big 12. He was first team All Big 12 last season, and he's continued to be Baylor's biggest threat on the outside. He's 6'3", he's fast as hell, and he is the one guy in our receiving corps who can consistently go up and out physical defensive backs to make a catch. Every now and then he'll drop an easy one he should catch, but he regularly makes catches that very few elite wide receivers can go get. Go watch his touchdown catch against Kansas State, and you'll see what I mean. So Mims, to me, is our best offensive weapon on the perimeter. But because he's such a threat, Jalen Hurd has been able to find plenty of open space and winnable one-on-one matchups. Hurd is 6'5", and we're primarily playing him out of the slot. And I don't think defenses have figured out how to scheme against that yet. He's going to make several catches over the middle of the field. He's still refining himself as a route runner, but his physicality and his size make it really hard to defend. And you mentioned versatility, and in that regard, Hurd has been the most important player on Baylor's offense this year. Think about this. He was an all-conference running back in the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
And so what you'll see is that Hurd is not only getting 5 to 8 catches every game, but he has become our short yardage back. And so I mentioned, that Matt Rule likes NFL-style offenses, but because of our personnel, we still mostly run shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
But at least 5 times this week in this game, you'll see Baylor line up in the traditional I formation, and Jalen Hurd will be at tailback. And when we've handed him the ball, you can see why he's an elite SEC running back. He has better vision and patience than anyone on Baylor's roster, and he has a rare combination of power and speed that remind me a lot of a B-team Adrian Peterson. I mean, he's awesome, man. He's going to be relied upon to have 150 to 200 total yards this week between catching the ball and carrying it. And I think you're going to be amazed by how natural-looking he is in both cases. He's a freak, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. He's really been impressive. There were some questions about how he would transition over to wide receiver, and it's been pretty much a seamless transition for him. He's really looked great there, just as he did at running back in the past, and he can still do that just as good as well. And let's talk about this matchup against West Virginia more specifically, and I want to flip over to the other side and talk about the Baylor defense a little bit. They're near the bottom in the scoring defense and rush defense, but the bright spot for the Baylor defense has actually been their pass defense, as they currently rank 4th in the Big 12 in that category. So that could potentially bode well for them in this matchup, as WVU has shown a tendency to be an offense that favors the passing game. Having said that, how do you see the matchup of Baylor's defense against West Virginia's offense playing out in this game, Scotty?
So here's what's so frustrating about Baylor's defense. Is that 90% of the time they look spectacular. Baylor regularly makes plays in the backfield, flies to the ball, and like you said, our secondary has played tremendously in pass coverage this season. But the Achilles heel of this Baylor team has been giving up the explosive play. And you saw that most against Kansas State. K-State, I believe, had only scored 1 touchdown of longer than 20 yards before they came to Waco. And I think they had 5 against Baylor.
Wow.
You take away those plays, and Baylor wins a landslide. So looking ahead to this game against West Virginia for Baylor, I think what's exciting is that you're going to see the 2 best wide receiver duos in the country. Mm-hmm. We already talked about Mims and Hurd, and I'm sure your listeners know good and well about the studs at West Virginia, right?
Right.
So the key for Baylor on defense, I think, is going to be getting pressure on Greer. I think Greer has shown that when you give him time, he'll eat you alive. But when he feels the heat, he can be prone to turn the ball over and make mental mistakes. And so I think you need to look for James Lynch and Greg Roberts on Baylor's defensive line to be the key in this game. And if they can get to Greer and sack him a couple times, rush him into some bad throws, I think West Virginia could find some trouble. But again, if the defense gives up even just a few of those explosive plays here and there, West Virginia's offense could be putting up some absurd totals, both in the running game and through the air. And Baylor did limit those big plays against Texas, but, one game doesn't totally convince me we've gotten rid of some of those issues. So right. I think those are the 2 keys for Baylor's defense this week is put pressure on Greer and limit the big plays. And we'll see if they're up to that task.
Yeah, putting pressure on Greer has been kind of West Virginia's Achilles heel for sure, especially the offensive line struggled in their past, 2 to 3 games. really a lot there. So hopefully they fix some things with that during the bye week. If not, it could be a long day because Iowa State wouldn't give up those explosive plays, and we saw how much West Virginia's offense struggled. So if Baylor can do that as well, we may see another struggle from West Virginia's offense and really see a slugfight in this game. But tailing off of that, and I want to proceed to talk more about the matchups in this game. West Virginia has possessed a relatively strong defense this season. However, of course, took a slight step back in their loss to Iowa State, especially yardage and points-wise. And as previously mentioned, Baylor does possess a potent offense and one of the better ones in the Big 12. So do you see them being able to make some things happen in this one, and how do you see this matchup playing out between Baylor's offense and West Virginia's defense?
Well, Matt Rule already mentioned in his press conference this week that playing against West Virginia's 3-3 front and that different-looking scheme is going to be a challenge. But I think it's a challenge that this Baylor team is going to take in stride. Baylor's offense is full of playmakers. We've already talked about Mims and Hurd, but Baylor has two more dynamic receivers in Chris Platt and Tyquan Thornton, who are both track guys, really fast. We have a trio of proven running backs in JaMychal Hasty, Treston Ebner, and John Lovett. And Brewer will beat you, both with his accuracy and his ability to run. But where Baylor has also been inconsistent, and it sounds like we've had the same problems here, is on the offensive line. And it's been really simple this year. When the offensive line gives Charlie time and opens up holes for these backs, Baylor's offense is just as good as any in the nation. When the offensive line can't protect or open up those running lanes, Baylor really struggles to move the ball. And that sounds like first-grade football knowledge, but it's really that simple. I know West Virginia has some studs like Tonkery and David Long Jr., guys like that. And if they can make plays in the backfield, Baylor could have some trouble. But honestly, I expect Baylor to have a really nice night offensively Thursday. I think Charlie Brewer is going to come into the game more determined than ever to make big plays after losing in his hometown against Texas. And, man, honestly, I expect a shootout. I think we're going to get high scoring from both sides.
I could definitely see that, and I think it's a good advantage for Baylor is the fact that Charlie Brewer did play against West Virginia last season and has seen this defense before and knows kind of what to expect from it, and that may help the Baylor offense as well in this one.
For sure.
And another good thing that is the preparation that both teams will have, as both teams are coming off bye weeks going into this game. However, they're kind of in different places mentally. West Virginia's confidence has probably taken a slight hit in recent weeks, especially following their last game and that abysmal performance in their loss to Iowa State, and their momentum is not at the level that it once was prior to this game. Meanwhile, Baylor's momentum seems to be building as the season is moving along, and their confidence is probably pretty high as well following such a great performance in their last game against Texas. So with one team's confidence perhaps taking a hit recently, while the others is presumably on the rise, do you see that affecting this matchup, or do you think it's just more about which team prepared better during the off week and leading up to this game will probably have the better performance?
I think both teams will be well prepared. I have a high confidence in Rule's staff in that regard, and I obviously have great respect for Coach Holgerson. I think what I'm most interested to see, and what honestly get most scared of, is how the Mountaineers come into this game. Because they're either going to come in pissed off and thirsty for blood, or they're going to come out flat because they've lost their stranglehold on the Big 12 title and maybe a playoff spot. But I expect the former. I think West Virginia is going to play angry. And I think that's scary for Baylor fans. I think the bye was good for both teams after heartbreaking losses. Very different kinds of heartbreaking losses, mind you. But both pretty heartbreaking losses. I think both teams are going to come in ready to play. But, man, I'm worried. I'm really worried if the Mountaineers have gotten their mind right and are mad and come out angry and start hot. It could be a long night for Baylor. And so I think that's what's going to be most intriguing to see is how West Virginia comes in and responds to that big loss.
Yeah, I agree fully. I think that it just depends on if that loss is going to either motivate them or discourage them is a big thing for West Virginia in this game. And really for both teams, really coming off, like you said, heartbreaking losses, although in different ways. But up to this point, Baylor is winless on the road in Big 12 play. However, that stat may be skewed slightly since both of those road games have come against arguably the top two teams in the conference in Oklahoma and Texas. So still yet, it's always tough to play night games in Morgantown, West Virginia traditionally. So do you see the fact that this game is being played at home and at home under the lights for West Virginia as an advantage for the Mountaineers? And if so, perhaps how big of an advantage?
There are 3 places in the Big 12 that terrify me. One is Ames, and you guys saw that firsthand.
Firsthand, absolutely.
One is Stillwater. That's a scary place to play. Baylor lost its best chance at a national title bid in 2013, losing to an Oklahoma State team we had no business losing to. And then the other is Morgantown. Scares me, man, and you're absolutely correct. Games in Morgantown are tough on opposing teams, and for Baylor, I don't think that's just been a night game thing. I think that's just an always thing. It is the longest trip we take, during the year, and man, that place gets wild on game day. And so the home field advantage is definitely going to be a factor. Baylor played well on the road in Austin, but Morgantown is another beast altogether. National television, Thursday night, Morgantown. Baylor, like you mentioned earlier, is playing a lot of young guys. So I think you're right, man. I think West Virginia should feel really good about the fact that they get to defend their home turf this weekend.
I think it's definitely going to help, especially coming off the loss in the way that they were. If they came off that loss and had to go play this game Thursday night at Baylor, it'd be a totally different story, and you'd be even more nervous. I mean, nervous already, but you'd be even more nervous than you are with getting this game at home, I feel like.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And McLean has kind of lost some of its intimidation in the past couple years, but I think the first 2 seasons we played there, we didn't lose a game there, man. Mm-hmm. Something like that. And so, or at least not until Steph Russell got hurt. But, yeah, man, I completely agree with you. Home field in this series, with the way both these teams are playing right now, is huge.
Absolutely. And so we've talked about the advantages a little bit, talked about the matchups a little bit, and now that we've done so, I want to kind of get your thoughts on this game and how it ends up playing out on Thursday night. And do you care to offer up a prediction as to who comes out on top and how the game ends up on Thursday, Scotty?
Here's the thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor wins. Mm-hmm. I think against both Kansas and Iowa State, the Mountaineers proves that they have some flaws, right? Mm-hmm. They can be exposed, some chinks in the armor there.
Absolutely.
And what I can promise you is that the coaching staff in Waco has watched tape from those 2 games on repeat since we left Austin, and is going to try to exploit those weaknesses. So I would not be surprised if Baylor win. But, and people in Waco are going to hate me, but I think the home field advantage, which we talked about just now, and the weaknesses along Baylor's offensive line will be the 2 factors that allow the Mountaineers to win this game in a shootout. And I think it's going to be close. I think something like 38-31 sounds about right to me. I think it's going to be fun. I think Baylor is going to scare fans in that stadium with how good they look. I don't know where the people of West Virginia are at in terms of their mindset this week, but if anybody's taking Baylor lightly, they're mistaken. This is not the same team that won 1 game last year. This is a much improved football team. And so I think Baylor's going to scare people, but I do think West Virginia finds a way to pull it out in a nail-biter, but it's going to come down to the 4th quarter. It's going to come down.
I agree. I mean, I think it's going to be a shootout and be closer than people expect. I saw the line for this game earlier this week was like 13.5 and 14 points, and I was like, wow, I just didn't see that coming as the line, and I think that's really way too high of a line. I don't know what Vegas is seeing, but I think it's going to be a closer game than that probably.
Yeah, I swore to myself I would never gamble on Baylor and not interfere with my rooting interest that way, but that's a good bet to put on Baylor there. Not because I think they'll win, because I agree with you, man. It's going to be a tight one.
Yeah, I think so. It's a good one, and it's weird from the West Virginia fan base side of things because it's kind of like that loss took a lot of air out of the fan base, really, and they're not so much as excited for this game as they typically would be, and more of taking a wait and see approach, like let's see what happens now, and just taking everything from earlier in the season with a grain of salt and seeing which team shows up and just trying to find out what this West Virginia team really is. And so I think I'm really excited for it on Thursday night, but I think a lot of the fan base is just kind of taking a wait and see approach with it.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think this will tell us a lot about both teams, man. I think if Baylor finds a way to win, that Baylor is even better than I think they are, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And if West Virginia can hold off a hungry, young, fast, explosive, strong Baylor team and get a comeback win at home, that says a lot about their resolve as well.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with you. But before I let you go and let you get out of here, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find your podcast and find some of your coverage there on the Please Bear With Me podcast, as well as the Bears Illustrated for the Baylor 247 coverage that you do as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I write for Bears Illustrated, which is Baylor's 247 affiliate, and you can just go to bearsillustrated.com and look for my articles. Scotty Swingler is my name. Here's what's great, Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
I started this podcast last season, Please Bear With Me, by myself. Did it completely by myself. Recorded it, edited it, paid for it to get out there.
Right.
And then halfway through the season, Bears Illustrated picked me up, and part of my condition with them is that all my content is free. And so there's a lot of content on those websites that you have to pay for, but everything I write and put out as the podcast is free. And so you can go to bearsillustrated.com to find all of that, or Please Bear With Me is the podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts and Google Play, so whether you have an iPhone or an Android, you should be able to find it fairly easily. And I'll give you a little preview, and I haven't published this episode yet. I think it will probably come out tonight, maybe the same time that this comes out.
Okay.
I had former punter Nick O'Toole on this week.
Oh, nice. Gotta love O'Toole. Yeah.
Nick is my favorite opposing player from any team ever. And when he came to Baylor, quick story for you real quick. When he came to Baylor, I was a sophomore. This was 2012. Mm-hmm. And it was his first year as the punter there. And we saw his mustache, right?
Oh, yeah. Hey, Lamar.
So we started a chant, the Baylor student section, started a chant every time he would take the field. And we would do the Olay chant, but with his name. So it was O'Toole, 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 O'Toole. And after that game, he tweeted and messaged me on Twitter that the Baylor fans at that game were his favorite opposing entity he'd ever seen. And so Nick O'Toole and Baylor have kind of an interesting relationship. So I got him on this week, and he talked about West Virginia, his time trying to make it to the NFL, and now he's actually training to be a firefighter in California.
Oh, okay.
So you can hear all that on this week's edition of Please Bear With Me, and yeah, I'd love to have you guys listen to it and let me know what you think. You can also find us on Twitter. The podcast account is bear_podcast, and then my account is just Scotty Ross ROSS Swing.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have to check that out. Nick's always been a fan favorite since his time in Morgantown, so I'm excited to hear that and give your podcast a listen as well.
Thank you, man. Yeah, he's great, and really appreciate that, brother. Happy to come on here and just talk football, man. It's a blast.
Always, always, for sure. I really appreciate you coming on, and looking forward to Thursday night, Scotty. Thanks again, man.
Thank you.
All right, so really great segment there with Scotty Swingler, the host and producer of the Please Bear With Me podcast, as well as the staff writer for Bears Illustrated, the Baylor 247 sports affiliate. And really great delve into this game and the preview of this Baylor team as well. And pretty awesome to hear that he's going to have former Mountaineer punter Nick O'Toole on his podcast episode previewing this game this week. So Mountaineer fans will probably want to check that out. I know I will, and glad he shared that tidbit with us, and really appreciate him coming on the show and helping us preview the upcoming game between the Mountaineers and the Baylor Bears. That being said, let's get into my X Factor for this game. Traditionally, my X Factor is a single player or a single unit of the team, but this week I want to go ahead and just name the whole West Virginia offense as my X Factor in this one. Last week it was the offensive line, and that proved to be a pretty good pick going into the Iowa State game, as the offensive lines struggled, kind of led to the offensive struggles, which was kind of a fear I had going into that one. And in this one, I think this is a huge game for the West Virginia offense in general. I mean, really the whole West Virginia team, it's a huge game for, but the offense needs to come out and perform in this game because, as I mentioned in my interview with Scotty, that it feels like the fan base is kind of on edge right now, taking a wait-and-see approach with this Mountaineer team going forward. And if West Virginia doesn't come out and get off to a fast start offensively, I think that stadium's going to be really tight there in Morgantown, and a lot of groans and grunts going to be coming from those fans out there on that field. So I think a fast start's key for West Virginia in this one, and really a good performance by the offense in general is a big-time key, just because this game is going to tell a lot about this West Virginia offense in the fans' eyes. I do believe is that you took your lumps against Iowa State, worst offensive performance we've seen by far, and you had a week off to try and fix those issues, and then a few days to prepare for this Baylor game, and it's a night game in Morgantown, a place where you normally perform well, and so this West Virginia offense needs to come out and start fast and have a good game and get back to the team that they were earlier in the season, because the fans are kind of taking a wait-and-see approach, as I mentioned, and wanting to see if this West Virginia offense they seen earlier was for real, or if the one against they seen struggle against Iowa State is more what this team is going to do. I think if the offense comes out and has a good performance, it will show the fans and everyone, maybe around the nation, that one game was just an anomaly and kind of a bump in the road of a very successful offense. And I think that's what the fans want to see and what we need to see from this West Virginia team for them to have success in this game. Baylor struggles as their team has been defensively, and so West Virginia needs to get out there and have a good performance on offense in order to win this game, because I think that Baylor has good enough offense that they're probably going to score a few points and they're probably going to gain some yards, and so West Virginia's offense is going to need to gain more yards and score more points. They're going to need to be the offense they were earlier in the season, and that's why my X factor in this game is the West Virginia offense. If the Mountaineers want to win, they're going to need a bounce-back performance and a good performance from the West Virginia offense. That being said, let's get into my prediction for this game.
It's that time. It's prediction time.
I mentioned in our interview with Scotty there, it's kind of a tough one to predict, partly because of what happened in the Mountaineers' last contest has you really nervous for this game, and I don't think, this game's kind of sneaking up on people, maybe being on a Thursday night. You're not as prepared as you were. It's just kind of creeping up on you, But the thing about this game is that this game is a huge game for West Virginia. A huge game for them this season. A huge game for this fan base to get them back believing again. A huge game for this West Virginia coaching staff, because you're starting to hear some chatter there, about the coaches. And, for the coaches to silence that and not make that noise be so loud. They need to really come out and have a strong performance with extra time to prepare for this game, or if not, you're going to see some of those whispers, some of that chatter turn into a loud roar about some of these coaches on the West Virginia staff, which I hate to see, but you got to get the job done in order to stop that, and I think that they know that. I think this team knows that, and the talk we've heard all week from the coaches and the players alike is that this loss that West Virginia suffered to Iowa State is going to motivate them rather than cause disappointment and make them stumble more. That they're going to use it as a turning point in their season and really get back to the way they were playing earlier, and that they're going to be ready to play. And from all accounts, this loss has motivated them, and they're ready to get back to work. Coach Holgerson said that after that loss, the guys wanted to go to practice the next day. Of course, they couldn't do that, NCAA rules and stuff, but they said that they've been ready to get back to work. They said that they have fixed some things in the passing game, some timing issues that arose in that Iowa State game. So this is a game for them to come out and show that they can put their money where their mouth is, and that everything they've been saying is not just talk, and that they're ready to bounce back and have a good season. That being said, I think that this is going to be one of those games where hopefully West Virginia gets off to a quick start, but I think Baylor's going to hang in there with them punch for punch, and it's going to take some big plays in the fourth quarter from the Mountaineers, probably offensively, and have to make some clutch plays in the fourth quarter to win this game. I mentioned against Iowa State that it was going to be that type of game, and I thought that West Virginia had the leadership and the seniors and the more mature players and a clutch player in Will Greer to be able to do that, but we saw that wasn't the case, as West Virginia was down 6 a lot of that third and half of that fourth quarter and couldn't put together that touchdown drive to take that lead in that game. So this game, I think you'll have a similar scenario. Baylor runs a similar style offense in that their quarterback can be a dual threat. They have some big receivers that can make plays. They just don't have that added running game effect, so they're probably going to score a few points. But I think that the Mountaineer offense has to perform better in this game. Absolutely has to perform better. And I think that in the fourth quarter of this one, you're going to have to see yet again the Mountaineers make a play, and they're going to have to prove that that contest against Iowa State, where they couldn't make a play when they needed to late in that game, was an anomaly and an aberration. And they're going to make the plays they need to in the fourth quarter in this one to come out with a tight win, I do believe. So I've got the Mountaineers winning this one 38-28. Alright, having said that, that will pretty much wrap up this Game 7 preview edition of the Country Roads Webcast, brought to you by Trio 4 Productions. As I mentioned, we are now the official podcast of Almost Heaven Athletics and AlmostHeavenAthletics.com. So we are now available on their website as well under the podcast tab of the menu there on AlmostHeavenAthletics.com. So check that out. And now I have a few sources where you can find the Country Roads Webcast. Still on SoundCloud as always, and on the Trio 4 Productions YouTube page for the video side of things. So you can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and now on AlmostHeavenAthletics.com as well. That being said, I really appreciate everyone for tuning into the show. I'm looking forward to a great game Thursday night against Baylor, and hopefully the Mountaineers can get back on track in that one. If you don't already, give us a follow on our Twitter page. We're providing content leading up to that game, as well as live tweets during the games usually. So our Twitter page you can find us at is at WVU Country Roads. And as I mentioned, be sure and check out AlmostHeavenAthletics.com. I've been contributing content there, writing a few articles for them. And you can also find the Country Roads Webcast there on their website now as well. So that being said, let's hope to see the Mountaineers bounce back on Thursday night and get back on track. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Cruz. And until next time, let's go Mountaineers.
Are you ready to party? Country road.